There is a delusional narrative most societies tell themselves. It is not written down, it is not formally taught, but it is absorbed quietly through education, media, and everyday conversation. The story goes like this. Power, while imperfect, is broadly rational. Leadership selects for competence. Cruelty is an accident. Corruption is a deviation. And when harm happens, it happens despite good intentions, not because of them. This story is comforting. It allows people to believe that suffering is the result of miscalculation rather than design, that injustice is temporary, that the system is fundamentally sane, merely unfinished. But there is another explanation, a far less comforting one. It suggests that some systems are not malfunctioning at all, that cruelty is not an error, that oppression is not a side effect, that in certain conditions, psychological disorder itself becomes the organizing principle of power. This is the concept of pathocracy. The word pathocracy comes from two Greek roots, pathos meaning disease or pathology, kratos meaning power or rule. Put simply, pathocracy means rule by the psychologically disordered. The term was developed by Polish psychologist Andrzej Lobachowski, who lived under both Nazi occupation and Soviet totalitarianism. He was not speculating from a distance, he was observing a system from within, watching how certain personalities rose while others were systematically excluded. His conclusion was unsettling. Under the right conditions, a small minority of people with severe personality disorders can come to dominate political, economic, and cultural institutions, reshaping them in their own psychological image. This is not metaphorical language, and it is not a moral insult. It is a psychological description. To understand pathocracy, we first need to understand something most people take for granted. What psychological normality actually looks like. A psychologically typical human being feels empathy automatically, experiences guilt when harming others, has an intuitive sense of fairness, forms emotional bonds, feels internal conflicts when violating moral norms. These reactions are not philosophical positions. They are neurobiological defaults. They act as internal restraints. Now contrast this with certain pathological personality structures, particularly psychopathy and extreme malignant narcissism. Such individuals may lack emotional empathy, experience shallow or absent guilt, view other people instrumentally, lie without internal discomfort, seek dominance rather than connection. Importantly, these individuals are not necessarily unintelligent. They are often charming, strategic, competent, and in competitive hierarchies, these traits can be advantageous. In healthy societies, pathological traits are constrained, social norms, accountability, consequences. But when a society enters prolonged stress, economic collapse, war, identity crisis, those constraints weaken, and something subtle happens. People who retain empathy hesitate. They doubt themselves. They feel moral conflict. People who lack empathy do not. They lie without stress. They exploit without remorse. They escalate without hesitation. This creates an asymmetry, not because the pathological individual is stronger, but because they are less inhibited. In unstable systems, inhibition becomes a liability. Lobachowski described the formation of a pathocracy as a gradual process called ponerogenesis, the birth of evil within a system. It unfolds in stages. Society experiences sustained stress. People become anxious. Norms weaken. Certainty erodes. Survival replaces reflection. Individuals without conscience exploit the confusion. They offer certainty. They promise order. They simplify complexity into enemies and slogans. Institutions begin rewarding ruthlessness. Those who hesitate are sidelined. Those who comply are promoted. Those who resist are removed. This is not always violent. Often it is bureaucratic. Once pathological individuals dominate leadership, institutions are reshaped. Accountability becomes performative. Ethics become branding. Loyalty replaces competence. At this point, pathology is no longer the exception. It is the rule. One of the most destructive features of a pathocracy is its manipulation of language. Words are not banned, they are redefined. Cruelty becomes discipline. Oppression becomes order. Exploitation becomes efficiency. Dissent becomes instability. This is not random. Pathological individuals do not experience moral emotions internally. So they learn to simulate moral language externally. The result is a population that feels confused rather than oppressed. Victims struggle to name their suffering because the words no longer mean what they used to. A crucial question arises here. Why don't ordinary people recognize the pathocracy sooner? The answer is deeply uncomfortable because psychologically, normal people project their inner world onto others. They assume no one would do this knowingly. There must be a misunderstanding. They must believe they are doing good. But pathological individuals do act knowingly. They simply do not experience the emotional signals that would inhibit them. This creates a tragic asymmetry. Normal people doubt themselves, pathological people do not. A pathocracy does not function through pathology alone. It relies on adaptation by normal people. This happens gradually. Silence to avoid conflict, compliance to maintain stability, rationalization to protect identity. No single step feels catastrophic, but over time, participation becomes normalized. People stop asking whether something is right and start asking whether it is allowed. This is not evil, it is human adaptability under moral distortion. Living under a pathocracy produces predictable effects: chronic anxiety because rules are arbitrary, learned helplessness because resistance feels futile, moral injury because participation corrodes self-respect. Eventually, society begins to resemble the psychology of its rulers. Suspicion replaces trust, power replaces truth, and fear replaces conscience. Despite their apparent strength, pathocracies are fragile. They cannot sustain trust. They cannot cooperate authentically. They suppress innovation. They cannibalize competence. They may persist for years, even decades, but they decay internally. Collapse, however, is rarely gentle. Lobazowski did not believe pathocracies were easily overthrown, but he believed something else was possible: understanding. Understanding protects individuals from internalizing false guilt. It preserves moral language. It prevents abuse from being normalized. Resistance in this sense is not always loud. Sometimes it is simply refusing to accept a distorted reality, quietly, calmly, accurately. Pathocracy is not about monsters. It is about systems that reward the absence of conscience. It is about how a minority of psychologically disordered individuals can, under the right conditions, define reality for everyone else. And it is about the uncomfortable truth that good intentions are not enough. Only psychological literacy is. Only moral clarity is. Only the willingness to name cruelty, without hysteria, without denial, stands between civilization and its erosion.